Today I'm going to show you guys how I mounted my front tow hook on the front of a 1997 Ford Ranger. A lot of people end up putting them inside of the bumper area, right around there. As you can see, right there where the light's shining, that's where they actually end up putting them. Which does work, but I'm just a little scared of it actually bending out that frame horn some. So I actually mounted it down below. I didn't do this side yet, so I'm going to show you how to do it. And, well, how I did it, and we'll go from there. You're going to need some step bits, some normal drill bits, a drill, and some sort of lubricant. I'm just using penetrating oil. Also, safety glass is good because you're going to be looking up as all the metal pieces fly down at you. And then some paper towel maybe, and a flashlight, and something comfortable to lay on. Alrighty, this is a view from underneath the truck. This is the front frame horn on the driver's side. As you can see where it actually bends over and attaches to the actual frame itself. This is the frame rail. Where I'm going to mount my hook is going to be pretty much right. Let's see if I could hold the light. There we go. I'm going to be mounting right in around here. I'm going to be passing the nuts through this hole and the washers through this hole. The catch is you need to have the nuts. Well, you need to weld a little piece of steel onto the nuts themselves, because you cannot fit any type of wrench or even a screwdriver very well to hold the nut still while you try to tighten it up. While you try to tighten up the bolt from down below. So, because of that, I'm only going to be drilling it today, and then another day I'm going to have the nuts actually have a little piece of, well, have a screw welded to one of the nuts, well, to all the nuts, and that'll keep them from spinning, but it needs to be able to fit through this. So you need to make sure that if you weld that screw onto the nut, everything must fit through this hole, because that's your only way to be able to get it inside. This is the tow hook in position. Remember that there's a little edge right here. You want the actual hook itself to be resting right against it. And now the spot where I chose was right here. It's a little bit on the bump that you see there for the back bolt. The other bolt is going to be right where the hollow is, and I'm going to put a washer in between there. This one, there isn't going to be any washer. It's just going to be flat against the frame, and then there's going to be two washers on the inside. So you just mount it here, and then you take your drill and you actually drill the first hole, which is right onto that first little lump there that you see, and just start it, and then you can take away the whole hook. There we go. So, tow hook goes like that, and you just actually take the drill, find the very center spot, if you could see anything there. Drill a point about there, as you can see. Now this one isn't as important. You just need to make sure that you have the bolt through this hole that you finish before you start drilling the next one. Only need a little bit of lubricant every so often. There we go, we have our first pilot hole done. Now the best way to do this, I found, is to do a pilot hole, do your full half-inch hole, because remember our bolts are half-inch. Actually bolt it all up, not tight or anything, but just enough to hold it. And then you can actually drill perfect center of the next one. The reason why is there's not very much play between a half-inch bolt and the inside of this guy, so you can't wiggle this much. So if you make these guys off, you probably won't be able to fit this very well, and you might need to re-drill other holes. I'm going to get my step bit now, and I'm actually going to drill into that one and make it full-size half-inch. The one that I'm using, this guy only goes up to a half-inch. You could buy others if you wanted, but this one's a lot easier because then you could pop it all the way through without worrying about making the hole too big. So you could use a normal drill bit too if you want, if you have a half-inch bit. I like stepper bits, they go a little bit smoother, I find. So that's what I'm going after now. Alright, so you could use the tip of the actual step bit if you wanted to do the pilot hole too. I just thought I'd save the tip of this as much as I can because it's cheaper for the other type of bits. So if I kill one of my other bits, I could just sharpen it or throw it out and get another one. These guys cost more, so once again, use oil. Well, penetrating oil, because normal oil is a little bit thick and I find it doesn't cut in quite as easily. And make sure you're wearing your safety glasses. And once again, even with these bits, fairly slow is still better for them. Just remember, you don't want to bend those bits too much. These guys are fairly hardened, so you can break them right off. So try not to swivel back and forth. Even though it jiggles quite a bit, try to hold as much as you can. We're getting there. Now, I'm just going to extend the end of this a little bit further out. That way I could get all the way through the hole and make sure that it's perfectly ½ inch all the way. As you can see, it's now lifted up a little bit further than it was. That way I could get all the way through the thick metal, because the metal's almost that thick from the base of this bit to the end of the drill. And this is the finishing of this hole. So this is a ½ inch bolt. It's a very tight fit, and that's the reason why the next hole needs to be pretty much as perfect as it can be. So I'm going to use the actual hook itself to do that one. First I'm going to clean up around this hole on the outside and the inside, get all the little shavings out of there. That way I can put this bolt and thread it through with the washer onto it, just kind of gently. It is kind of fun to do because you need to do all of that from inside of that little hole that you can see there. That hole. Because there's the actual hole that I drilled. And then the actual hole that you need to try to fish the nut up through is that one. And then you need to try to put the nut on using this one and that hole. This next one is why you need to have an actual piece of metal welded to the nut, because you need to fish it through this same hole, push it all the way down here, and obviously you can't hold on to much there, especially for torquing. So anyways, I'm going to clean up this hole now, clean up inside of there, and then I'm going to mount the hook with this one bolt, and then I can mark my next hole where I need to drill and get it started, and then I'll take it all apart and then finish off the drilling on the front one. There we go. Now let's see if I could show you how. I'm going to be pushing these washers up in. Alright, now, here's the washer. Then you spin it over so it's flat. You try to line it up with that hole. Then you get a second one in there too. Well, unless you have grade 8 washers. I unfortunately only have grade 5, so I'm going to use 2 of them. And you see how tight it is to try to fit them in. They just fit. There we go. I'll use this hole to help push myself through here. Now I'm just setting one on top of the other inside. And yes, it's as fun as it looks. Now I need to try to get the bolt through the hook and in through those washers, and then put a nut on the back. It takes some lining up. It only worked well because I did this before. Right now I'm just holding the nut with my finger inside of the frame while I turn the bolt to try to tighten it down some. Alright, so it's just tight enough that it holds itself in there now. And you want to take the hook and you actually want to push it right against this part of the frame horn. That way it actually holds it kind of stiff, and if you do get tugged sideways on this way, at least you have a little bit extra holding on. I don't think it really matters much because these bolts shouldn't move at all anyways, but it's always there just in case. So make sure that thing's just snug enough it doesn't wiggle too much. There we go. Now we need to position our drill with a different drill bit. We need to put on our small guy again. That way we don't ruin the tip on this guy. We keep it as new as possible, and maybe it'll last a little longer. And the bit that I'm using here is actually a 3/16. You could use pretty much whatever smaller bit you want, as long as it allows your step bit to be able to drill through. So this is actually making it so it's up to like the second point or whatever. You can make it a little bigger or this size, whichever one works. I just have a lot of this type of bit, so if I do ruin it, I have more to go. Alright, spray a little bit of this just to take off any dirt that might be right at that spot, and to lubricate it. Now, the whole thing about this is you want to try to find the very center point, if you can. As close as possible to the center. Now that's a good point. Now I'm going to take that hook back out so you can actually see what I'm doing underneath there. First I'll check to make sure I actually made a good enough hole that I could follow. Starting point. Yeah, alright, we're good. Alright, now I'm going to take this off. And yes, it could be fun working with these things, but this is the way I'm doing it anyway. Alright. Now, there's a little hole right there that I'm going to go after. Clean out that hole from above some. Try to make sure as much of the crap's out of there as we can. Alright. Little lube. and away we go. Alright, now, if you're like me, you might be unfortunate and one of your holes might not be perfectly straight up and down. This one's kind of on an angle a little bit. The reason why is I hit against the inner part of this inside the hole. You need to remount this guy a little bit more to make sure that that bolt goes straight up and down. That makes sure that your bolt's going to be as strong as possible. Alright, here we are back again. I now have the little bolts, or screws, welded onto the nut. Just remember that when you're welding them, to watch out for the inner threads, because sometimes they will get all kinds of spatter on them and stuff, and it's really hard to put the bolt through. So, if you can, try to clamp the vise like this, while you weld the actual screw onto it. But they need to be strong enough to be able to take the torque when you're trying to tighten them, because they're going to bump against the sides of your frame railing. So, that's them. This one's got a little bit of spatter in it, so I'm just going to run the bolt through it with a wrench and my ratchet a couple times, just to make sure that it's nice and clean and smooth to turn. There we go. So you want to get it so it's almost as smooth as this, which is basically just like it would have been without any welding on it. Alright, so a little test for the bolts here. There we go. Now, also a test for the washers going up, and for these little nuts with a bolt, or with a screw welded on. This is just kind of a dry run anyways right now to make sure that everything fits right before I get the thread locker onto stuff. There we go. Now the only thing is when you tighten up this bolt, you're going to be trying to make this guy spin this way too. So I'm going to try to make it so it's hidden against this side onto that. What I'll do is I'll actually bring it around like this, so it's fitting in the front for this guy. In the back one, I'll actually have set up like this. That way they don't bump against each other and gives me the best chance for them holding still. Alrighty, now make sure that the washers are lined up for this guy again. There we go, and the back one's holding nicely too. Alright then. Well, nothing wrong with that. Both of them are fitting in nicely, so now I just need to clean those nuts and bolts so I could actually get the thread lock to stick on nicely, and try to put it together as quickly as we can, doing the front bolt first and the rear bolt last. So only put the thread locker on right before you put the bolts together. Gives you the most amount of time to be able to play around with it. So take it back apart now. So here we are adjusted to 80 foot-pounds, and we have blue thread locker, which is medium strength. I didn't really want to put red in there, just in case I want to take these off by hand. And so you just apply a little bit of thread lock to it. And you usually only aim to put on first little bit of threads there, because it'll push all the thread lock right down with the nut anyways. So the next one, you put on some thread lock. There we go. So once again, get that guy up through the hole. Try to hold that nut still if you can. Now, you can just start tightening these guys up together. Remember, that thread lock is still slowly drying as we speak, so it's good to try to get them adjusted as soon as you can. Now I'll switch over to using my torque wrench. That's our back one tightened down. Now at least with that part that was welded in, it's still going to need to try to catch onto something. So you can just stick the screwdriver right in against the nut. Almost. Alright, well, this is definitely a good reason right here why those bolts that you get welded on, you might want to put them a little bit bigger, or as big as you can to fit through this hole. Because if that little bolt snaps off, or the little screw that's welded on snaps off, that nut inside is now spinning freely and you can't get it tightened down. The rear one worked fine, he didn't spin too bad at all, but this front one is spinning very easily. Because of that, I can't get them down to full torque. It's a great idea to have those screws welded onto those nuts inside. But if you're going to do anything different than me, I would recommend using thicker bolts. Because unfortunately this little guy snapped right off inside, and it made it so I could only tighten up the front bolt to about 60 foot-pounds instead of 80 like the back. All it is just got weak at this point and snapped right off the nut. So I should have thought of that at first. I didn't. Oh well. That's what it ends up looking like.